Today we will be looking at advanced form controls, specifically data repeaters and subdialogues. These are by far the two most commonly used advanced form controls in decisions. Data repeaters are a custom control that can be used on any form and consist of other form controls as well. Subdialogues are essentially a data flow that can display a form for user interaction. Subdialogues can also be used within an existing form and help in reducing clutter. Within data repeaters, you have the ability to configure the following. The design. Here you can configure what a single item will look like. It allows for more control in how data is displayed when compared to using a data grid. The list. The custom group that repeats for every item on the list. And finally, the complex type. This allows you to have specific controls shown for something like a complex data type in a repeatable fashion. Subdialogues are very similar to data flows, but they have the ability to show another form popped up on top of the parent form. Their main purpose is to change data on the parent form, either by pushing or manipulating data back on the form. They of course can also be used to just simply display information to your user. All right, let's jump into creating our own data repeater. First, we're going to start by creating the actual repeater. We're going to head over to create form. I'm going to create a new one. And from our selection here, we're going to select data repeater. Repeater control. We're going to give it a name. Go ahead and create. And now we're in our form designer for our data repeater. From here, we're actually going to create a repeater to add account email addresses. We're going to go to our far left and select or search data repeater. Once we're in our data repeater designer here, or form designer, we're going to go to our properties tab on the right, select pick. We're going to search for accounts, and we're going to select the first option. Let me move the S here. That shows up. We're going to pick that. And now we're going to transition over to our left-hand side of the screen. Under data, we're going to expand form data, and we're going to look for email addresses. Go ahead and grab email addresses and drag it over to our repeater. Let's try it one more time. Perfect. We're going to identify it as a text box. And now we're going to go back to our toolbox. Select the label. We're going to make sure we label this as email addresses. There we go. So now we created our simple data repeater for our email address. We can go ahead and save. We jump out. And now we're going to create a new form to add that repeater to. So I'm going to go ahead and create form. Give it a name. We're going to go ahead on our toolbox and search data repeater. From here, we're going to add the data repeater first. Add it to the space in our form. Then we're also going to add the data repeater add button and the data repeater remove data button. We're going to give our data repeater a name. Now we're going to also go to pick or create source and give it a source to work with. Which we already created that repeater. And there we go. We've added the repeater to our form. Let's of course readjust our form here. We don't need it to be so big. So let's adjust it a bit. Shrink our form. Give it a bit of sizing here. Let's also make sure to add a submit button or a button general to our form here. Now we can call it submit. And before we finish with our form here, we need to make sure to go select our data repeater, and in our properties panel, we need to identify our add button and our remove button. Just make sure to give it a title. Let's go ahead and save it. And now we're going to actually create a flow to utilize that form and data repeater in. So let's go ahead and create a new flow. Give it a name, of course. And for this example, we're going to be adding a new email address to our account here within our decisions instance. So we're going to need to go down our steps folder here, look for integration. Then we're going to look for internal services. Then within internal services, we're going to look for account service. Expand that. We're going to utilize our get all step and begin our flow. Once we have that step added, we're going to add our form. So we're going to go back up, select our show form step. And because we already created our form, we can just select it. We go pick existing. Select the form. And let's go into our actual form. Make sure it's the right one. You always want to double check. Perfect. It is. Let's jump back out. Our end step. Now we want to identify our inputs. For our account address, we get all. And for our other input here, we simply ignore it for this example. Now we're going to add one last step so that we can test out and ensure that our repeater is actually working. That's going to be our add items to list. We use that step, add it to the end here. And we're going to finish off our flow. We're going to go ahead and give the inputs. We look for our account addresses. And we're going to select all email addresses. And then again, for our second input here for original list, we can ignore this one. And now our validations should all be correct. Let's go and test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and debug it. We can see it pulled up all the existing emails within the instance itself. Now from here, we of course have the ability to add a new email address. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's add another one. Let's go ahead and submit. Now, if you go to our items to list step and we look at our input output data, we can look at all the items that came in. And we can see what we added, the 2 email addresses that we added down here at the very end. And we could also look at our new list, which will show those 2 email addresses that we just added. And that's an example of how to build and utilize a data repeater.